What do you do when you have discrimination or some type of bias held against you during the police hiring process? Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, we have those gifts in the description for you. The Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through every phase of the hiring process, probably some that you may not even know about, and give you that guidance that you need so you know what's coming your way so you can better prepare. Preparation phase is key to everything. Additionally, we have those free coaching calls. Sign up for a free coaching call. Be glad to sit down, go over anything that you think might help you in your hiring process, give you the best guidance we can. We have extended hours down there for you as well. Now, you're discriminated against or someone holds a bias against you in the police hiring process. And what do you do? How do you move past this? Why is this happening? Here's the inside tip. It's probably not going to happen when you think it's going to happen, and probably not by the people you think. Most people think that they're going to have some type of discrimination or bias based on the police department, based on them deciding whether or not you know, you're the right fit for them, so to say. That's not accurate. Really, the police department, because they're a government entity, is bound by more regulations than any other part of the hiring process. They are probably the least discriminating against because they want diversity because it allows them to reach out and connect more with their community that they're serving. No, instead, you're going to see it in the third party systems, right? The third party systems could be the polygraph, the medical, and then the infamous psychological exam, right? The psych is probably where you're going to see it the most. But let's touch on the polygraph and medical. What type of bias and what type of discrimination will you see there? So the polygraph, right? The polygraph is administered by another individual, and usually it's a third party company. Not all the time, but usually it's a third party company. Let me be clear about these third party companies. They are already paid. They're 100% already paid by the time you get there, right? So they have already they've already received their money. Now they just need to get you out because while you're in there, you're just costing them money at this point in time, right? So either you make their job easy or you make their job hard. And if you make their job hard, they're just going to try to make their job easy, right? It's just natural human behavior or any animalistic behavior. You want to take the path of least resistance. If you go into your polygraph and it's a third party poly and you go in there and you show up and you're not in professional attire, people unconsciously, right, start making decisions about you. Oh, this person's in sweatpants and a sweatshirt. No, not going to fly. Oh, this person's shoes are dirty. This person's hair is messy. This person hasn't bathed. This person's breath smells. All that stuff creates an unconscious opinion in people's mind, and it's just psychological, right? It's naturally there. You can't do anything to defeat it, except you can prep yourself beforehand, right? You can go in, you can mitigate any of these biases by just doing what you're. It's not going to be the typical bias that you probably thought when I started this video, where you're thinking it would be racism or sexism. That is not usually the case. Usually it's some type of identifiable marker outside of those that really winds up becoming a bias when it comes to these third party individuals. So for the poly, it's you showing up unprofessional, right? They know they're interviewing a police candidate at this point in time, and you show up unprofessional and they're saying, why would I want this person to be a cop? They might pull me over and there's nothing professional about them. Right. There's that concept. Let's jump over to the medical real quick. So the medical, so you show up and you show up for your medical and you are, say, overweight or you're not the fittest you could be, right? And I'm not talking being shredded, that you're in the gym every day. I'm just talking about being healthy, right? You do calisthenics, you do body weight exercises, things that allow you to move and the things that keep your health at its optimal. And you go in there and the medical examiner sees you and say, "Oh, this person's never going to pass the stress test or the breath test," right? It's these type of, I don't even want to call them biases, because what it is these individuals are learning this stuff from experience, right? You get a doctor that goes and does so many police medical evaluations that they see who's going to pass and who doesn't pass. It's much like what I do, where I evaluate a police candidate and I say, hey, you have a lot of hurdles in your background, and some of these you can't articulate well. It's going to be very difficult for you to get hired. Whereas others, this is very simple to articulate if you just learn to articulate them, and you'll be fine, even though you feel it's the biggest hurdle in the world. It's the same with these doctors, right? They're going to go in and they're going to evaluate you first just based on appearance, second by the way you communicate, and then third by the actual evaluation. And that's going to be the poly too. So going in, once again, learning to articulate yourself, going in, understanding that once you start applying to law enforcement, maintain your physical fitness, your physical health, I should say. And that's the path you really want to go. And now let's get to the biggest bias that I see from the hiring process. And that is a third party psych examiner. It is horrendous what I see out there. It is just horrible. Let me give you a little story here. This happened to a recent coaching member of mine, and now they are hired, right? They're hired. We got them hired with a police department, and they're living their best life, enjoying their career out there serving the community. This individual had had an issue with the psych exam, right? Went in, and these are understand psychologists are supposed to be, the most aware individuals, right? The problem is that they're so aware that they have their own biases about themselves because they feel that they're so aware. Oh, I'm trained in psychology. I understand the human mind. I understand real intent. And I get to determine whether or not someone becomes a law enforcement officer, which is not the case, right? However, a chief or a hiring board will probably not go against a psychological exam unless that psychological examiner has been shown to be, biased or unprofessional, or even, failing a category of individuals, which is what we're seeing nowadays. A lot of psychologists are being fired, or departments are contacting them and saying, hey, this psychologist working at this office cannot see any more of our candidates because there's an absolute bias there. And that's what we're seeing every single day happen now, because they feel that they are just God's gift to law enforcement and they're going to fix everything wrong with the police profession, and yet they can't recognize their own unconscious bias about their own ego. And so here's where it falls too. Someone comes in. Let me get back to the story actually here. So this person goes in and, typical question, hey, why do you want to get into law enforcement? And this individual made a comment about their faith, right? Something I've seen a lot with a lot of psychologists more recently is that these psychologists tend to be agnostic or atheist, right? They don't carry any type of faith or religion basis. And the psychologist used that against my coaching member. It was the most unprofessional thing I've ever come across recently. My member mentions how faith is a driving force and how they want to serve because, faith-based. And this professional psychologist says right out that they're an atheist, right? That should not be a factor. When it says came out and disclosed their their religious beliefs or lack thereof, and then used it against my coaching member. That coaching member was failed their psych, right? And then was just distraught, didn't understand, um, went to another psych exam with another member, right around the time that they were finding me in our program, and signed up for the free coaching call, and we discussed it. However, we didn't have enough time to prepare for the second psych exam, and the results from the first psych exam played a factor in the second psych exam, and it was just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. That those first psych exams would transfer over because that first psychologist was so unprofessional, to attack someone based on their religion, and to say that would make them a bad fit for law enforcement was just horrendous. And so it can't transfers over. So now two failed psychs under their belt. And then Then we got them into coaching. We start coaching, we're working through everything, we're working on articulation, and then I teach the path to get through the psych exam with while being honest, while being truthful about everything, but making sure that they learn how to recognize question correlation and closing the loop so a psychologist doesn't go down that road or use that bias against the coaching member, or excuse me, the coaching member, but the police candidate. This individual applied to a department and then got assigned the same original psych examiner that had failed them, right? So they apply, they get sent to the same psych. And this is a few months later, roughly about 9 months later, that they went back to the same psychologist, which is usually, if you know anything about the hiring practice, usually that's not enough time. But this individual had some coaching. They took in all the training really well, absolutely 100% prepared. The psychologist said, "You are a whole new person, right? You have completely changed, and you're a whole new person." And the only reason they said that was because I taught my coaching member how to avoid that sensitive subject with that psychologist discussing religion, right? That coaching member came back and said, "I am more deeply rooted in my faith now than I've ever been. And the fact that I passed the psych with the same person was just astounded how simple it was when that first time she felt horrendous, right? The psychologist just attacked this individual, and and it just shows the absolute bias that you'll see from psychologists. Now, this isn't all of them. You can't categorize the entire profession just off of some, but that has been the biggest bias I've seen statistically from my members. Is I see a bias from psychologists based on age. I see a bias based on other protected classes, right? So age, religion, I'm not going to get into all of them, but going down that line. And that's the unfortunate aspect, because the psychologist or the psych exam is a valuable part of the police hiring process, and it really is a good fit for what it was intended. And what it was intended was, it was intended to make sure that someone could handle the mental stressors of the law enforcement profession, and then that individual would was a self-aware or aware enough to accept, the sometimes the struggles of the profession, not just the positives. Unfortunately, it's kind of gotten away from that due to some biases that I've seen within the psychological profession. And right now, that's something that the law enforcement profession as a whole, specifically in the recruitment side, is correcting. I've seen a lot of strides move towards correcting, and we'll keep trying to correct that. But keep in mind, that's the discrimination and biases that you're going to see. It's not necessarily based on on gender or race. No, I usually see it from third party individuals, and a lot of it is on everything that you can control, because there's a reason why they came up with the term unconscious bias, and everyone can have it. The question is, can you recognize it and then defeat it? More on the recruitment side than for you. But even still, if you have unconscious biases going in, they're trying to detect them as well. So just be prepared. You know, why turn them into conscious and then defeat them, and that's everything. I hope this helps. Remember, those gifts are down in the description for you. One is the Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through every phase of the hiring process. There's some hidden bonuses in there. Additionally, sign up for a free coaching call. I'd be glad to talk to you about anything, any struggles you've had during your process, or anything you're worried about going through your process now if you haven't went through it yet. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.